Since I had so much fun last week learning and researching about the Stone Age, I thought, why not continue that and see what people were up to after the invention of agriculture? I thought it would be interesting to look at humanity from prehistory all the way up to civilization, because humanity has a very interesting story. To keep things simple, we classify the history of humans in 3 categories. There's the Stone Age, there's the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. Now, I already have a video on the Stone Age. If you want to go check that out, I think that you should. It's very interesting, has a lot of information, and will help you understand this video. But now it's time for the next step. It's time to look at the Bronze Age, the age that man discovered metal. Welcome to Vlogs of Knowledge. If you haven't watched last week's video, then I'll just recap a little bit so you kind of know what's going on and have some background information. In the beginning, man had no tools. He had to use his bare hands for pretty much anything. And as you can imagine, that made life very hard. You had to hunt with your bare hands and you had to build stuff with your bare hands. But that all changed when man realized that he could use stone for his advantage. Stone allowed man to build his first tool. Now his first tool was very primitive. It was something called a hand axe, which is a simple rock that's pointed on one side and rounded on the other side to fit in the palm of your hand. That rock could be used for hunting, but it could also be used to sculpt other rocks. As time went on, primitive man realized that he could use stone with wood, for example, and make even better tools like spears, fishing harpoons, and even weapons. Now these tools, they were okay, like they were good for the time, it was better than nothing, but they were still made out of stone. They were never meant to be durable to last a long time. After thousands of years, it was time for a change. And that's where we are. That's what this video is. The Stone Age ended with the coming of agriculture around the year 10,000 BC. What came afterwards is the Bronze Age, and usually we give the Bronze Age the years from 6000 BC to somewhere around 1200 BC. But again, these dates are approximations and they're not supposed to be exact. The Bronze Age was the first time that humans were using metal to make tools. They had finally realized that if you found ores in nature, you can mine those ores, heat them up at the right temperature, extract the metal, and then you can make something out of it. You can make a tool and even possibly a weapon. According to our records, copper was the first metal to be discovered. Now we don't really know how humans discovered copper. Maybe it was a pure accident, or maybe they were looking for it. I don't think it matters that much. I think what matters for our purposes is what they did with it and how they used it for their tools. Copper is an amazing metal. It's so good that we're still using it today, and we're using it a lot. We're using it because it's very conductive. It conducts electricity very easily, and because of that, a lot of our wires are made out of copper. Now, although the Bronze Age didn't have electricity, nor will they have it for like thousands of years, they still managed to find a lot of uses for copper. It's a soft metal, and because of that, you could hammer it into whatever you wanted. It's very flexible, and that has advantages and disadvantages. For one, well, you can find a lot of uses for a flexible metal. You could put it to good use. But on the other side, you can't make weapons out of it, because what if you have a sword made out of copper and you hit an enemy and the sword bends around the enemy? I don't think you would want that. And that's why it's not called the Copper Age, but the Bronze Age. Copper by itself isn't good enough. You need to mix it with something else to produce a stronger metal. I hope that you've noticed that my animations are heavily inspired by video games. That's because as a kid, I was a huge gamer. I would play games non-stop. I was addicted to the computer. And one game that I played for a lot of years was a game called RuneScape. RuneScape is a game that you would call a role-playing game. What that means is that you create your own character, you explore the world, and you just do whatever you want. You create your own destiny. There's no set path that you can take. And it's also an online game. You played with other players. And in that game, you could specialize into whatever you wanted. You could farm, for example, you could cut trees, you could hunt, or for our purposes, you could smelt metal. The game had a leveling system, which meant that the higher level you were, the better things you could do in the game. The better monsters you can fight, the better trees you could cut, and the better metals that you could find and make. And can you guess what the first metals were in that game? It was copper and it was tin. The game showed you how to find copper, how to find tin, how to melt them together in a furnace and produce a bronze bar. With that bronze bar, you would take a hammer and you can make it into whatever you wanted. You can make armor or you can make weapons. It was really just do whatever you want. Now at the time, I thought this was just a simple game based on its own rules. Like I didn't think it was following anything from reality. But what I did know is that what I was doing was exactly how humanity progressed. They first discovered copper, then they discovered tin, they mixed them together, and they made bronze. That's what the Bronze Age was all about. Now bronze was a lot stronger than copper, which meant that finally you could make weapons out of bronze. And boy did they make weapons. That's why it's called the Bronze Age and not the Copper Age. They also mixed copper with zinc to make brass. Brass has a gold-like color, which meant that it could be used for jewelry. Now it wasn't as good as gold, it wasn't as pretty as gold, but it was a close second. although copper and zinc were a little bit harder to make than bronze, which really pushed this to the Bronze Age and not the Brass Age. This was a huge improvement for humanity. Bronze became the standard for pretty much anything, weapons, armors, tools, you name it, and it was being traded heavily between the different civilizations. It was much stronger than stone, but when hot it was completely liquid, which meant that you could make it into whatever you want, wait for it to cool down, and you have yourself a nice piece of tool. So it makes sense that stone was the one that came first. It required a lot less work and a lot less sophistication as a tool. For those that are paying attention, you may have noticed that I was talking about the Stone Age, then the Bronze Age, and I kind of mentioned civilizations. Well, how did these civilizations came to be? Did I forget to talk about them? Well, not really. The Bronze Age, although shorter than the Stone Age, a lot more things happened in the Bronze Age than did in the Stone Age. For example, civilization was created. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail as to how that happened because that'll be a whole video on its own. I will briefly mention it. Civilization happened around the year 4000 BC. Usually when we're talking about that, we're talking about a settlement that has been there for quite some time. They have trade going on with different places, they have some sort of political order, and they also have writing. When a settlement has all of those things, we can usually talk of a civilization. With the coming of the Bronze Age, people were already settled. That was because of agriculture. Finally, they were able to settle down and live their lives in one place. They had trading, they had law, they had some sort of political organization, they had everything they needed to become a civilization. And that's where we start to see the very first ones of those, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Egyptians, and the Babylonians. Each one of these took bronze, made their own tools, and began trading. And because of all that trading, the estimation dates for the beginning and end of the Bronze Age are not that different compared to the Stone Age, for example. This was really what they call the cradles of civilization. It's where history was started. The Bronze Age wasn't all about metal. Like I said, a lot of things happened during that time. For example, the invention of writing, the invention of the wheel, and the cradles of civilization. You can obviously expect videos on each of those subjects, but I wanted this one to focus only on the metal because I think it's what best represents the Bronze Age. And now, here are my questions to you, because I really want this to be more than just a show. I want this to be a conversation. What do you think about the Bronze Age? Did you learn anything new, or did you know things that I didn't talk about in this video? I would love to know, so please leave me a comment, and bonus points for you. You might get featured in next week's video as a fan of the week. As you know, and as I say at the end of every video, I haven't talked about everything, and the things that I did talk about, I haven't gone into too much detail. That's okay, that's done on purpose because I want you guys to go out and research on your own, and maybe learn a thing or two. With that being said, my name has been Cosden. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you all next week.